My name is Bertie Marsh, and I'm 28 years old. On the morning of my wedding, my father's name lit up my phone for the first time in 7 years. My dress hung on the closet door. The three-tier cake I'd baked the night before sat cooling in the venue kitchen, and my phone buzzed on the vanity with a single word glowing on the screen. Dad. 7 years ago, my sister told our parents I was selling drugs. They believed her, and within the week, my duffel bag was sitting on the front porch. What that message said, and what I texted back 50 minutes before I walked down the aisle, is something my family will be explaining for years. Welcome back to Calm Karma Chronicles, where the quiet ones in the family finally get to tell their side. If you believe the truth is worth waiting 7 years for, drop a comment and subscribe. Second rise smells like brown butter at 4 in the morning. That smell belongs to me. I built it. Every burn scar on my forearms is a receipt. The bakery sits on Larkspur Street in Dunsmore, between a hardware store and a salon that closes at 6. We live in the apartment above the shop. Most mornings, Noah is still asleep when I fire the first oven. He's a carpenter. He proposed with a ring he hid in my box of instant yeast. He said, "That's where I keep everything that matters." He wasn't wrong. For 7 years, everything that mattered to me fit in places I could lock. A lease with only my name on it, a bank account nobody else could touch. A man who knocks before opening a door in his own house. He learned early that I need the knock. People call that independence. I call it what's left over after your family holds a trial without you, and you lose. Here's the thing about dough. It forgives you if you're patient. Families are trickier. I wasn't always this careful. Once I was a 20-year-old with $3,000 in cash and a plan taped inside my closet door. 7 years ago, I learned what my savings looked like through my father's eyes. It didn't look like flour and butter and a girl who worked doubles. It looked like a crime. Nobody called the police. Police would have meant evidence, and evidence was never the point. They just packed my bag and set it on the porch. The whole thing took less time than a batch of biscuits. Let me take you back to Aldridge, to a house that ran on a rule nobody ever said out loud. My mother died of an aneurysm when I was 12 on a Tuesday folding laundry. My father, Mark, was a foreman at the lumber mill, a big quiet man who loved us by fixing things. Grief broke something in him no wrench could reach. 2 years later, he married Sharon, a receptionist at a dental office with an 8-year-old daughter named Leah. Dad adopted Leah the following spring. In our house, our parents meant Dad and Sharon. I said it that way too. I was 14, and I wanted a family more than I wanted credit. Sharon ran the home like a waiting room. Everything scheduled, everything pleasant, nothing examined. And Leah was small and pretty and afraid of everything. She'd been moved into a dead woman's house at 8 years old, and she figured out young that fear was currency. The house had one law, never posted, always enforced: whoever is crying loudest gets heard first. Leah cried beautifully. I don't say that with venom. I say it the way a baker reads a recipe. She learned the oven she was given. I learned a different trade. I learned quiet, good grades, a part-time job at 14. Dishes done before anyone asked. I thought if I could just be easy enough, cheap enough to love, I'd get to stay. Dad would look at me across the table sometimes with something soft in his face, and I'd bank it like a tip. I didn't understand the arithmetic of a scared man's heart yet. When keeping the peace is the whole religion, the child who needs nothing is the child you can afford to lose. It took me years to learn that math. Leah learned it in one school semester, and she was about to show her work. When I was 20, I won a scholarship to a pastry certificate program, 2 counties over. The night before a dinner Sharon planned to celebrate it, Leah, 14 by then, cut her forearm with a craft blade. Not deep enough. The dinner was canceled. The scholarship was never mentioned again. Late that night, my father stopped me in the hallway. I thought he'd bring up the scholarship. Instead, he looked at a spot just left of my eyes and said, "I have to protect this family." He said it to me, not to the blade. To me, as if I were the weather. I said, "Okay, Dad," because I was 20 and I still thought love was a test you could pass by being agreeable. I took the program at night anyway and told no one. Leah healed up fine and got her learner's permit that spring, and I started keeping my envelope of savings in my dresser drawer under the sweaters. That turned out to be the most expensive mistake of my life. By 21, I was working 2 jobs, waitressing mornings and stocking shelves nights, feeding an envelope of cash toward a deposit on a commercial kitchen corner and a used display case a church was selling. $3,200, give or take, saved over 2 years. I also kept a second phone, a scratched-up flip model from my catering orders, birthday cakes, church potlucks, a wedding sheet cake that fed 150 people. It felt like a beginning. One September evening, I was counting the envelope on my bed when I felt the air change. Leah stood in my doorway, 15, phone loose in her hand, looking at the money the way people look at a buffet. Where'd that come from? I told her the truth. Tips. 2 years. She smiled and drifted off. I don't think she planned it that night. I think she filed it away as material. It came apart in 1 week of October. Move 1, Sharon found her own sedatives missing, then found the bottle tucked under my sweaters beside my envelope. Move 2, Leah, summoned to the living room, dissolved into sobs and said I'd been selling around town, that the flip phone was for buyers, that I'd made her swear not to tell. She never once said the word plainly. She didn't have to. Move 3 was the money itself, set on the coffee table like a verdict. I brought bank slips. I begged to be drug tested that night. Sharon crossed her arms and said, "Tests can be cheated." Proof read as scheming, calm read as cold. There is no performance an accused person can give that satisfies an audience that needs the accusation to be true. That Saturday, before anything could be checked, Leah took the wrong pills. She was fine by Sunday. But you cannot cross-examine a girl with a hospital bracelet. The following Friday, I came home and found the porch light on. My duffel bag sat zipped on the mat with my winter coat folded on top. The folded coat is what broke me. Somebody had thought about weather. Dad opened the door before I could touch the handle. He said they'd prayed on it, that with Leah so fragile they couldn't have this under their roof. He never said drugs either. The word did its work in the pauses. I asked him to look at me. He almost managed it. Then he said the sentence this whole story hangs on. I have to protect this family. I said, from me? And my father said nothing at all. This was the man who taught me to ride a bike. The man who cried at my mother's funeral until his shoulders shook. The man I once watched carry a fawn off the highway with his own 2 hands. Nothing. The silence lasted maybe 4 seconds. Bread takes longer to brown. I picked up the bag and left the coat. Some pride is just grief in work boots. My family will tell you nobody kicked me out. They'll say I left. The duffel bag was already packed when I got there. But sure, I left. I drove to a grocery store lot where at least the security guard knew my name and slept in my car 3 nights, showered at a truck stop, clocked into both jobs on time. The one thing nobody could repossess was that I knew how to work. I was 21 years old. On the 4th morning, I drove 40 minutes west to Dunsmore, a town where nobody knew my name. There was a diner on Larkspur Street called Rosa's, steamed-up windows, handwritten specials. A woman about 60 with a pencil behind her ear watched me the way you watch a pot deciding whether to boil over. Rosa Serrano. She poured me a coffee I hadn't ordered and asked one question. Running from trouble or toward work? I said work. She looked at my hands, the burn scars already starting, and hired me to wash dishes on the spot. There was a storage room with a cot behind the kitchen, and she rented it to me for almost nothing. She never once asked what happened. Not in 7 years. That's its own kind of gospel. That first night, I made myself a promise. I would never again live anywhere I could be voted out of. Not a house, not a marriage, not a job, not a story. If I built it, if my name was on it, nobody could hold a family meeting about my life without me in the room. Here's what 7 years of building looks like, sped up, 2 years washing dishes and prepping pies. Then Rosa tasted my lemon bars and cleared the corner by her register. We shook hands on a revenue split. Within a year, there was a line out her door on Saturday mornings, and the line was for me. I paid off my car. I got an apartment with a deadbolt I installed myself. Meanwhile, in Aldridge, the story had settled into the drinking water. The spring I turned 23, I ran into an old neighbor at a farmer's market. She smiled, the smile you give a stray dog you're not sure about, then moved her son to her other side, casual as changing lanes. A lie about you, given enough quiet, stops being a story people tell and becomes a thing people know. But one person from Aldridge never bought it. Nana Ruth, my father's mother, drove to Rosa's on the first Tuesday of every month for 5 years, until the month she couldn't. Corner booth, black coffee, whatever I'd burned the edges of. Free of vanity, she called it. She never once asked if I did it. Not even in the beginning. 3 months after the porch, she slid an envelope across the table. $30 inside. For the display case. Don't tell your father. I tried to explain about the money, the phone, the pills. She waved it off. Bird, she said. She's the only one who ever called me Bird. I know money when I see it, and I know my son when he's scared. Then she buttered her toast like the matter was settled, because for her it was. Being believed for 1 hour a month turns out to be enough calories to live on. My oven at the diner corner died one Friday with 150 rolls on the schedule. The repair place sent a carpenter named Noah Cole. 31 then, sawdust on his forearms, quiet in a way that wasn't hiding anything. He fixed the hinge in 70 minutes and undercharged me, then came back twice more to check the calibration. Ovens don't need checked. He asked me to dinner with his ears going red. On our fourth date, at a taco place with plastic chairs, he asked the normal question. So, your family? I made a decision I hadn't planned and told him all of it. The envelope, the sedatives under my sweaters, the porch light, the folded coat. It took a while. Our food went cold. He didn't say, wow. He didn't get the lawyer look people get when they're privately weighing your story for holes. He just listened the way he measures twice, carefully. Then he said, so you saved $3,000 in 2 years on tips, and they never asked to see the bank slips again after that night. Like the outrage was a measurement. Like he was checking a joint that didn't sit square. He believed me before I finished the sentence. I didn't know that was allowed. I went home that night and cried for 20 minutes. Not about my family for once, but about how low I'd set the bar for being loved. Just believe me, that's it. That was the whole bar. Nana Ruth died in January at 81 in her sleep. Beth, my cousin, the only one who ever moved between my two worlds with her hands visible, called me herself. The funeral was at the church in Aldridge, and I went because grief outranks exile. Sharon met me in the vestibule with a hug for the onlookers and steel underneath. Best if I sat in the back and kept things simple, she said. No scene. My request to say a few words was declined. The program was already printed. I sat in the last row of my own grandmother's funeral. My father never once turned around. Leah read a poem and half the church cried with her, and I thought, she's not even faking, that's the terrible part. Afterward, in the parking lot, Beth put a shoebox in my hands. Inside was Nana Ruth's recipe box, hundreds of index cards in her backhand slant, and an envelope with "bird" on it. The note inside was brief, and it's load-bearing, so I'll give it to you exactly. Truth doesn't need a crowd. It just needs time. Second Rise opened 14 months later in the storefront beside Rosa's, funded by a small business microloan and my display case. The name makes bakers smile. The second rise is the one that comes after the dough gets knocked down. Rosa cut the ribbon with kitchen shears. Opening day sold out by 11. That summer, Noah proposed in the kitchen at closing, ring hidden in the yeast box, down on one knee on tile he'd laid himself. He'd already asked Rosa's blessing, since she outranks everybody. The wedding was a year out, and I want to be honest about what was also true that happy night. Happiness like that has edges. There's a shape a father leaves. Not the man himself. The man himself, I could go months without thinking about by then. The shape. The chair he'd sit in, the toast he'd give. By spring, the seating chart had taken over the back counter, and at the top of the venue's printed template sat a line, Father of the Bride. On the ceremony map, 2 front-row chairs. I kept skipping past them the way your tongue skips a sore tooth. I penciled nothing, erased nothing, just moved cousins around them like water around a stone. No invitations crossed into Aldridge. That was policy, decided calmly over takeout. We would not send paper into that house just to watch it get discussed. But Beth had spent 7 years being the only person who moved between my two worlds with her hands visible, and she got one. She RSVP'd yes over an eclair at my counter before the coffee cooled, then went quiet in a loaded way, turning her fork over. Finally, she said the sentence that cost me a month of sleep. What if they change before October? I laughed it off in the moment, said something salty about the odds. But that night, I lay awake next to Noah doing the thing I'd trained myself out of, the thing I'm most embarrassed to tell you. I hoped. I ran the movie. My father calls in August. There's a shaky voicemail. An apology with no but in the middle of it. He's in a gray suit in the front row in October, crying into a handkerchief. I ran it twice, then made myself get up and drink water in the dark kitchen until it stopped. Hope for people like me isn't a gift, it's a tax. 7 years of record said they didn't change. They redecorated. Nobody had ever said the one sentence that would cost them anything. The call came at the end of July. Not my father, not an apology. Beth, on a Sunday night, her voice cracking before she got through. Back in June, Leah had picked up a DUI outside a bar in Aldridge. 2 weeks later, Sharon caught her taking cash from her purse. The family convened one of its famous meetings, and cornered about the money. Leah went to pieces. The real pieces this time. Out it came at the dining table, in front of Dad and Sharon and Beth, the sedatives she'd planted in my drawer, the story she'd invented in an afternoon, the flip phone that was only ever birthday cakes. She was 15 and terrified of the money, she said. Terrified I'd leave, terrified the house would tilt again. 7 years of my life, confessed in under an hour. I stood in my dark bakery holding the phone with both hands, waiting for the part where somebody drives to Dunsmore. Beth went quiet, then said the part that mattered. Bertie, that was 3 weeks ago. They told no one. They said they were handling it as a family. 3 weeks of my father knowing his daughter was innocent, eating breakfast, saying grace. The verdict I'd waited 7 years for had come in, and they'd sealed it to protect the girl who forged the evidence. I locked up the bakery. I don't remember climbing the stairs. Here's what they don't tell you about vindication. It arrives with no confetti. I'd imagined that phone call for 7 years, in the shower, kneading dough, at red lights. In the fantasy, the truth lands like a verdict read aloud, and everyone who wronged me files past to say the words. In the real version, I was a 28-year-old woman standing in her own kitchen at midnight, technically innocent for 3 weeks already, and nothing anywhere had moved. No call from my father, no letter from Sharon. The lie had been retired quietly, like a defective product with no recall notice sent to the people still using it. My old neighbor still had her hand on her son's shoulder somewhere. That week I drafted a text to my father maybe 10 different times. One draft said it plain, he'd believed her in one night, and it had taken him 7 years to believe me. My thumb hovered over send until the screen dimmed. I deleted it, not out of mercy, out of thrift. I had a bakery to open at 5, and no budget for a war. I used to think the truth was a door. Turns out it's just a window. You can see in, nobody has to open it. Noah found me at 2 in the morning wiping down counters that were already clean. He didn't say anything smart. He just took a rag, and we wiped clean counters together in the dark. That's as close to a definition of marriage as I ever expect to get. You can always tell when a family system feels threatened because it stops arguing facts and starts distributing guilt. August was the campaign month. An aunt I hadn't heard from in years texted, "Family is family, honey," praying hands emoji, as if that sentence had ever paid one of my utility bills. Another wrote that a wedding is God giving everyone a chance to heal, a beautiful thought to have about somebody else's wedding. Word of the October date had gotten through. Small counties have excellent plumbing, and nobody had asked to be invited. Exactly. They asked me to be bigger. Sharon sent an actual letter. Lovely stationery. 3 careful paragraphs about Leah's remorse, her fragility, her progress, the delicacy of her recovery. For me, 1 line at the bottom, like a tip. We hope you can find grace in your heart. Grace, in that grammar, meant silence with a bow on it. My father sent nothing. But twice that month Rosa clocked his truck rolling slow past the bakery at closing. Once it idled across the street long enough that she started for the door before it pulled away. 55 years old, 100 feet from his daughter. A windshield's worth of glass may as well have been a canyon. I have to protect this family, he told me once. He was still doing it, I just still wasn't in it. The first Tuesday of September, I carried a box of lemon bars through to Rosa before either shop opened. I'd written a whole speech and it evaporated on contact. What came out was the load-bearing part. You gave me a job when my own father wouldn't give me a phone call. Will you walk me down the aisle? Rosa wiped her dry hands on her apron 3 times, looked out the window and said, "Mija, I've been practicing my walk for 7 years." We both went to pieces over the lemon bars. That night, I filled in the blank line on the seating chart, father of the bride, Rosa Serrano. It wasn't revenge, it was an answer, and answers like that don't come with an undo. Beth called in September wanting to tell the whole county what Leah had done. I told her the truth already did its job at that dining table. What people chose to do next, the letters about grace, the slow drive-bys, that wasn't the truth failing, that was them answering it. One Saturday night in early October, Beth was leaving her mother's place 2 doors from the bakery and saw my father's truck parked on the street, engine off, lights off. He was sitting in the cab with his hat off, holding it in both hands like church, talking alone to the windshield toward the lit sign of Second Rise. Stopping. Starting over. Beth watched my father rehearse an apology to a pane of glass for 10 minutes, then put his hat back on and drive the 40 minutes home. Do I understand him? I do. Understanding is a thing I can give him for free. It's not the same as a seat. 10 days out from the wedding, the last piece dropped, and it dropped exactly where I should have known it would. Leah checked herself into the behavioral health unit at Aldridge General. Real, this time, the debt, the court date, the sealed secret leaking. I genuinely hope it was the beginning of everything for her. Both things can be true. Tuesday morning, my phone rang with an Aldridge number, and for the first time in 7 years, I heard Sharon's voice. No, hello? Leah was in the hospital asking for family. Stress had been piling on her from all directions. Then the sentence she'd dialed 10 digits to deliver: if something happens to her while you're celebrating, that's on your conscience. I counted to 4, slow, the way you count when the dough isn't ready, and neither are you. I said I hoped Leah got every bit of help she needed, that Beth could pass along the ward's address for flowers, and that I had a cake in the oven, which was true. It was my own wedding cake. The night before the wedding, I baked. I pulled Nana Ruth's hot milk cake card from the box, so worn the ink had gone gray. Her note was taped to my refrigerator since the January of the funeral. Truth doesn't need a crowd, it just needs time. Noah stole frosting off a beater and said, "Whatever tomorrow brings, we already won." Not a pep talk. An inventory. The morning was cold gold light, maples going shameless, Beth's kids thundering through the farmhouse getting ready room in their socks, bobby pins and bad coffee. I was mid-laugh at something when the room's noise dipped and my phone buzzed against the vanity. Dad! 7 years, and the caller ID still said Dad, because I'd never changed it. If you want to know where hope hides in a person, there's your answer. It lives in the settings you never update. I let it ring out, then a single softer buzz. A message. It was 9014. I sat on the edge of the daybed, an hour on the clock, and opened it. Leah told us everything. I know I'm 7 years too late. She's in the hospital and she's asking for you, Bertie. I'm asking for me. Let me have the father-daughter dance. Give me the chance I didn't give you. 7 years came apart in my hands. Everything I'd rationed since I was 21 was in that message. The admission, my name spelled out by his thumbs, an apology with no but, and underneath it, the exact shape of the fantasy I'd run in the dark after Beth's June question. Arriving intact, real, offered an hour before the aisle. That's the cruelty of it, and I don't even think he designed it. He'd found his courage at the last vending machine in the building. I stood up because sitting felt like agreeing to something. The woman in the mirror stood up with me. White dress, my mother's earrings, hand steady. I made myself look at her while 2 futures ran. Future 1, I text him back. Come. He walks in weathered and sorry. 70 guests get a redemption story. The county cries. The dance happens. And every October after this one, my anniversary belongs partly to his timeline. His rescue, his 3 weeks of silence, cashed in at a discount at the exact hour I had no room to negotiate. Future 2. The message gets answered by the life I already built. Rosa's arm. The pencil line on the seating chart. The girl in the car who promised herself no more houses she could be voted out of. My whole body wanted Future 1, and I need you to know that. Wanting your father is not a weakness you outgrow. It's a tide, and it was in the room with me. But wanting isn't arithmetic. He believed her in one night. 7 years. Not one phone call. And now, 1 hour, 1 message, 1 dance, requested like a change of address. I typed it standing up, thumb steady, no drafts this time. You believed her in 1 night. It took you 7 years to believe me. The dance is taken. I hit send and felt the floor hold. Then I opened a message to a number I'd kept for 7 years and never used, and wrote to my sister in her hospital bed. I hope you get well, not for them, for you. Send. I powered the phone all the way off and put it in Beth's hand. Until tomorrow, I said, and she took custody of it like something dangerous. The barn doors were shut, and through them I could hear the rustle of guests and 1 fiddle. Rosa stood beside me in navy blue, more nervous than I was. Your grandmother is insufferable right now wherever she is, she said, and nearly ended my mascara before the doors even moved. Weeks before, I'd stopped skipping the 2 front row chairs on my side. They weren't empty and they weren't removed. On the first sat Nana Ruth in a silver frame, laughing with her head thrown back. On the second sat her recipe box, the gray-inked hot milk card standing upright in front of it, the card that built the cake waiting in the cooler. Here's what I saw walking down that aisle on Rosa's arm, because I was cataloging it on purpose. My kitchen crew in 1 row, crying into each other. The security guard from the grocery lot retired now in a tie. Diner regulars who'd eaten my first burnt batches. Noah's grandmother. Beth, radiant, guarding her clutch with my whole old life switched off inside it. Every face in that barn belonged to someone who'd shown up during the 7 years, not before them and not after the verdict. 7 years ago, I was voted out of a family. That afternoon, one voted me in unanimously, standing. Noah cried at the end of the aisle in the best way, which his brothers will be invoicing him for through the next decade. We were married at 10 in the morning. I remember almost none of the ceremony and all of his face. At dusk, string lights woke up along the rafters. The DJ said the words Noah and I had rewritten on purpose. The bride will now dance with the woman who gave her a shot. Rosa met me at the center of the floor and 70 guests stood up. Partway through the song, Beth touched my shoulder and tipped her head toward the long window. Out past the string lights, in the gravel lot, sat my father's truck, and beside it, my father. Standing at the driver's door in his good jacket, hat in both hands, the windshield posture, the rehearsing posture, an hour out of the hospital he'd spent his week at, and not one step toward the barn. Just watching the lit window, watching his daughter dance the dance he'd asked for that morning, with the woman who'd earned it over 5 years of First Tuesdays and 2 years of dish shifts. The old me, the girl still auditioning, felt herself start toward the gravel. I stood still instead, and through the glass I gave my father one small nod. He received it and returned it. Hat back on, into the truck, taillights down the farm lane. That was the whole conversation, and it was the most honest one we'd had in 7 years. He was still protecting his family, standing behind that glass. So was I. I stopped auditioning that night. The role was never mine to win back. We cut Nana Ruth's hot milk cake with Noah's hand over mine. Rosa gave the only toast, brief, because she distrusts microphones. Family is whoever shows up early and stays late, she said, and looked around the barn. So apparently I have 70 children now. Nobody was filming any of it. Everyone was too far inside the night to document it, which is how you know a thing is real. 5 months later, on a cold March Saturday, I met my sister at a park in Dunsmore. Her request, her drive, a letter that asked for 30 minutes and promised no ambush. I told Noah where I'd be and went alone. Leah looked different. Sober 4 months, working at a nail salon 2 towns over, doing the unglamorous outpatient work that doesn't make for good crying scenes. She brought me a coffee with my order written right on the cup, which meant she'd asked Beth, which meant she'd prepared. We sat on a bench by a drained fountain. She read from a folded page so she wouldn't perform it, itemized the pill bottle by name, the afternoon she invented the story, what she'd been afraid of. That emergency room weekend was real, she said. But I knew what it was buying, and I let it buy it. No excuses attached, no request folded inside, which is how you spot the real ones. You don't owe me a relationship, she said. I just didn't want to be one more person who never said it to your face. I looked at my little sister, 22, chapped hands, 4 months of real, and gave her the whole truth back. I forgive you, and we're not going back. Both of those are true. She nodded like someone receiving exactly what she'd budgeted for. We finished our coffees talking about nothing, her roommate's cat, my new apprentice, and hugged once quickly before I watched her drive off. We trade birthday cards now, once a year, and that is the entire relationship, and it is honest. The old house goes on as the old house. Sharon's Christmas letter says everyone is doing wonderfully. My father's card came to the bakery mailbox last month, my name in his handwriting, something folded inside. It's in the drawer under the register, unopened, not thrown away. Some doors you don't walk through, and you don't nail shut either. You just live gladly on your side of them. On Sunday mornings, Second Rise runs a free class now. The chalkboard says, baking for anyone starting over. We fill every seat. Here's what 7 years taught me, and you can have it for free. An apology can close a wound and still not reopen a door, because forgiveness is something you give, but a seat at your table is something people earn. That's my story. One lie that cost 7 years, 2 chairs in the front row, and a dance that was already taken. If you're the one your family didn't believe, your truth doesn't need a crowd, it just needs time. If this story found you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs it. Drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself.